Hi, this is Elliot Fishman here on Combed. Welcome to our latest Facebook Live. It's Wednesday. It's getting warmer. I think it's April 10th. And it's glad everybody is here. We're going to talk about cinematic rendering. Many of you have noticed, even today, that we are putting cinematic rendering, not uncommonly, on Facebook. We've also been very busy academically writing a lot. Linda Chu, Steve Rowe have published between them more than a dozen articles over the last few months. There's a number of more in press. There's articles, AJR by Linda on the pancreas. There's an article by Steve just recently on small bowel. There's an article by Steve and Linda just got accepted to JCAT on stomach. There's an article by Steve just got accepted to abdominal imaging on the kidney. We've published on cardiac. We've published on vascular, and we did spend a lot of time today in the last few days finishing up a bunch of things to submit to RSNA, and it's noontime, which is the deadline for RSNA abstracts for RSNA 2018. If you did not submit your abstracts or exhibits or whatever else, it's too late. Don't worry about it, because there's always 2019 RSNA. Deadline is 12 months from today. So with that, let me speak to you a little bit about cinematic rendering. We put a lot of effort into 3D in general. We helped develop Derek Nye, the Pixar team, Silicon Graphics, Siemens, all of the 3D volume rendering that you've known and come to love. I don't want to go through in great detail the detail, but cinematic rendering, excuse me, cinematic rendering is a form of volume rendering, but remember, one of the big things about volume rendering initially was that it was a single light model. You could adjust it, and that's what gave a lot of the depth perspective and the 3D perspective. Now, with cinematic, what you're doing is having multiple light sources. There was an article written about this about 3 or 4 years ago as GPUs came along from NVIDIA to be able to do this kind of lighting model. And Siemens has been able, Robert Schneider at Siemens particularly, has been able to kind of implement that into a product, and we've had the privilege of working with them at some of the new product. And I've been spending a lot of my time doing presets. One of the challenges with cinematic rendering is it's hard to get presets. One thing I'm very good at, modestly speaking, is developing presets. So I spent a lot of time developing presets, and I probably have maybe about 80 or 90 presets, from liver to spleen to kidneys to lung, and you name it. So let me just tell you a little bit about what we're doing, and a little bit about what we've been doing just the last couple of days, something since Sunday, which I've been able to kind of figure out a bit. So one of our classic applications is in the pancreas, and this article by Linda Chu this month, AJR, is very good, showing you, in this case, for example, the mass in the body of the pancreas, the encasement of the arterial and venous structures, and multiple collaterals. Very good look at the perspective of depth, the extension. The surgeons, Chris Wolfgang, Matt Weiss, and the like, just love this in terms of preoperative planning. We've looked at work on the liver, and I think Linda is preparing a manuscript on liver imaging and submitted something to RSNA. There's a nice example showing you a mass in the left lobe of the liver, which is a cholangiocarcinoma. But you can see when you do the cinematic rendering, both the cystic components, the depth of the lesion, extent, vascular mapping, and you can just imagine this can be helpful in preoperative planning. We've done a lot of work. There's an article just got accepted, I mentioned, into JCAT, accepted without revision, no less, which looks at vascular processes, for example, doing the stomach. These are multiple carcinoid tumors in the stomach, the vascular. Look at the detail of the gastric folds and the masses in the stomach. So again, think about how we can improve many of the things we do, not just solid organs like liver, spleen, kidney, but also things like the stomach and small bowel, which you can see nicely there. And speaking about the small bowel, abdominal imaging, I think it's this month. Here's a nice example of a carcinoid tumor in the mesentery right lower quadrant. You can see very nicely the desmoplastic reaction, the encasement of the SMA, the encasement of the SMV. All of that is really nicely shown when you look at these images. And then, of course, in renal carcinoma, here's a patient with a clear cell RCC right kidney. You can see views from behind where you really get a good look at the spine. You get a good look at that tumor coming off the back of the kidney. Again, think about it from a partial nephrectomy perspective. Think about it from surgical planning, whether it's ablation or a partial nephrectomy. This case was a partial nephrectomy. But you can see the information we can gather. Now, one of the things to remember, and I do forget to remind people of this, is that we do not do any special data acquisition for cinematic rendering. We don't raise the dose. We don't do anything special. We don't change the slice thickness. We don't change the algorithm. So it's basically everything we classically use in terms of imaging. So it's our routine protocol. So everything is post-processing. I personally do all the post-processing, so it's not something I think that a tech can do, though obviously you can train technologists to do that. I think it's the radiologist who really needs to know what it is you show. So I do the classic volume rendering, I do the MIP, and then I do the cinematic. In the cinematic, I focus on some of the things I need to answer or show better. I think if I had to pick one thing about the cinematic, it's really that preoperative planning. It's what the surgeon really needs to see and the surgeon really wants to see. So I think that becomes very critical. Now, you'll notice that everything I've showed you are static images, and for a while, and I think the production product is only static imaging, but now with better GPUs and rewriting the code, you can do things interactively, and I think interactivity is really everything. And I thought I would show you just a couple examples of that interactivity, but I also wanted to show you this incredible rendering we've now come up with, which is a way of shadowing. And look at the vessels. The vessels are almost negative, but look how you see that GDA tracking over the pancreas. Look at the splenic artery and vein going into the spleen. Look at the texture of the liver, the texture of the spleen, and also I'm not highlighting in this case, but the appearance of the kidneys, which are a little bit white because of their enhancement in this arterial phase imaging. But look at the details of what you can get of the pancreas. Now, this is me doing a video from the computer, so you have to realize the speed is really how fast I want to go. It's not a limitation of the computer being slow. It's me trying to scroll nicely and show you what I'm looking at. But here's another same case. Look how nice that pancreatic texture looks. Look at the vasculature. Look at the spleen, the feeding vessels. And again, look at the mapping. One of the things we are working on for deep learning in detecting pancreatic cancer is looking at the mapping of the gland, looking at textural changes. And I believe that textural changes are seen before a mass is seen. And can we find the normal versus abnormal? And that's something we are looking at very, very carefully. And I think something that we will find to work. So that to me becomes very, very important. Here's another. Here I'm putting back the bone. I'm also showing you a little bit more of the liver. And as I just go through that data set again, relationships of vessels to organs to glands. Think about it if you're the surgeon and you want to do laparoscopic surgery. Wow, this is really going to look identical. I was showing this at conference yesterday to some of the surgeons, and they were saying, actually, it's better than what you see at surgery. At surgery, there's blood and fluid, and you kind of know where everything is, but you never get the same views. So imagine this as a preoperative for a laparoscopic Da Vinci procedure. I think with robotic surgery, Da Vinci becoming more and more the mainstream, this has tremendous opportunity. Look at the detail of the gland, but also the orientation of gland to vessels. And again, imagine this with spread of tumor. And so just very, very impressive renderings. And I'll just show you one more case. And here the rendering is a bit different. But this is a patient with a mass in the pancreas. And what I did here is I'm showing you, and I accentuated the venous structures. Look at the collateral vessels in the stomach. Look at the portal venous system, the hepatic veins. And look at the detail of all the collaterals. You can see if you look carefully, the portal vein SMV confluence is occluded, and these are just simply all collaterals that you can see very nicely. So a really nice display, and again, Think about this compared to looking at slices. You realize that slices just don't cut it. You have this information, 1,800 slices, real-time rendering running on NVIDIA GPUs. NVIDIA is now speaking about their hardware and basically making cinematic rendering almost a commodity in that regard, running it across the spectrum of hardware. And Clara is the new NVIDIA medical platform, and I think they may end up with things like cinematic rendering on a platform. So it could be very, very interesting, but you can see the details of what we're able to see. So I guess the question is, how do you go forward? And I'll just jump back to one of my other slides, which is this carcinoid tumor. I think what you're going to see when we talk about radiology 3.0, radiology value, this is much more than just dictating a report. These are value images, because whether you're speaking to the patient and showing them, whether you're speaking to the surgeon, whether you're doing pre-op planning or follow-up, it's within the volume that everything is happening and all knowledge is. The question is, how do you use this information to improve the detection and management and differential diagnosis of tumors? How do we put this into the deep learning? And again, we're putting a lot of effort in deep learning, and I think things like cinematic, or the things that come out of cinematic like texture, are going to become very, very important. So we're looking at that very carefully. I think there's a lot of time and a lot of knowledge that needs to be gained. We're probably doing 100 plus cinematic renderings a week, maybe more than that. But where will that go? What will we learn? Can we make the presets such that things will look better? Can we use artificial intelligence to generate the presets? That's something we are looking at that. So it is very good. So with that, let me go to questions. I know a number of you are online, and I see a number of comments, but does anyone have any specific questions? This would be a good time to ask questions. I know that most people do not have cinematic rendering, but I think that will change over the next couple of years, whether it's from Siemens or other companies. I think there is a lot of interest, and I know surely when we submit papers, the reviews have been generally very strong, because the images just have a way of taking your breath away, because they look so photorealistic, and it looks like what you might expect to see. And again, when you talk about 3D imaging, accuracy, fidelity, all of the things that one-to-oneness between the patient and the images become very, 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 very practical and very, very important. Let's see, what else can I tell you? In terms of doing a study, I would say if I was not filming the cases or making videos, I surely could do a case in under 5 minutes. That's a dual-phase data set. Sometimes if you're doing a lot of taking images and making videos, it can take longer, but that really truthfully shouldn't count. So it's pretty fast. It's not like it's a process that's, oh my God, we got to spend a week doing these cases. I can do them very quickly, and I do them very quickly. Again, the interactivity has really gotten good. Before, we would do a lot of downsampling, so you would get to a certain point, you would downsample, and it would be very, very hard to know exactly what the right parameters are for looking at a case. With now I could do it and get the right parameters. It jumps back a little bit when you stop, but I can probably just by memory overcome that. So that works out pretty well. If you want to learn more about cinematic rendering, we just happen to have a meeting May 5th to 8th in Nashville. And you can find it on CTisus or on our Facebook page. You can register for the meeting. If you register today, I'll give you $100 off. If you say you saw this lecture and you call the number at Hopkins and you register, only today we'll give you a special prize. It's going to be a great meeting. I'll be speaking about cinematic rendering. Tony Cook and team, Lauren will be showing how to do cinematic rendering on workstations, so you'll be able to do it yourself. Let me see any other questions. Could I share some of the parameters? I'm not sure what the parameters mean, but as I mentioned, the protocol for acquiring the data is the same, and then we have presets that we're developing and are continuing to develop. So I'm not sure what that is. Do you have dates for Vegas yet? Yes, November, I think it's 15 to 17. If you look at the front page of Facebook, it's on top. I think it's 15 to 17, 2018 at Caesar's Palace. It's a good time to sign up. You can just mark it on your calendar. The brochure should be coming out soon. I'm finishing up the program, and we will surely have cinematic rendering there. Anything else? Anything else that's pressing to anybody? Well, it doesn't seem to be. So if you look at CTisus, you can see a lot more information on cinematic rendering. We summarize some of the articles, which are worthwhile looking at. You can go and download those and take a look at them. And if you think of any other questions, wait, Carl has a question. Can cinematic rendering objects be artifacts in a radiology report besides being a secondary capture? I'm not sure what can be objects. At this point, probably not, but there's no reason why it can't be. You can do image capture and then put them and embed them in the reports. That's probably the easiest thing, and we can send videos. So I think you probably can do with the cinematic what you can do with any other imaging. One problem, and this is a more theoretical problem, when you make the videos, they're WMV files, and they run about 25 megabytes. And when I change them to Mac format, they then become 80 megabytes. So they are kind of large. But I think that's just the way I do things, and probably does not necessarily need to be done that way, and probably I'm doing it incorrectly anyway, why they're getting so large. Well, with that, I think our time is up, and I wish everyone a great day. Last question, could you show us how good the interactivity is by sharing your screen? Well, you have to look at the video and you can see, but I don't think we're going to do Facebook Live on my workstation, to be quite frank. You just have to come to the meeting. You come to the meeting, you can sit there and play with it yourself, and you can see firsthand how good the interactivity is. Okay? And with that, I'll say have a great week, and we'll see you next time.